Two artists are twice as nice. Hey there, I'm Jackie Ferris. This week on the 302, we're talking to husbands Tim Barton and Joe Barbella. We're going to be talking about their art and their process. Get ready, the 302 is designing your way. It isn't every day that you get to peer into the mind of the artist, but today we get to talk to two artists about their work and what it means to them. I'm joined now by Tim Barton, who has a really unique shadow box creative medium. Talk to me a little bit about the things that you put together.
So I like to collect things, right? I'm an artist. Did a lot of looking at Joseph Cornell, who was a big box artist back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. So I was very intrigued by that. I also like the idea of grouping different objects and trying to find their relationships between each other in space and that type of thing. And I like the idea of aging things and making them look like they have a story behind them. So that's how I kind of fell into the world of box making. But I mean, I was trained. I do have my degree from State University of New York in fine arts and printmaking and sculpting. But really enjoy the box making aspect of it because it applies to, there's a technical aspect to it, which I really enjoy. And then there's also the creative aspect, which comes in with how the objects relate to each other. So
let's talk about this piece. This actually won an award at the Rehoboth Art League. Tell us about that and what this piece represents.
So this is, it's Time Equals Zero is the name of this piece. And it's the idea of renewing yourself or new beginnings, that type of thing. How things, there's always a beginning and an end, but the idea of a beginning is always, at least for me, seems to be full of promise and hope and something new and being able to remake yourself. That's kind of what the whole piece is about, that you can always start over and you can always have a time equals zero and begin again, whether it's like on a commemoration, like a new year or on a birthday or even a birth is a renewal of spirit.
So when you look at your work, you can tell it's very personal.
Yes.
Very personal. I want to talk to you a little bit about recycled. When you look at it at first, you know, you see the Liberty Bell and you're like, oh, the Liberty Bell. But upon closer inspection, there's barbed wire, there's a handwritten note, and a picture of a child. What are you trying to tell us here?
So that piece is all about how people get recycled themselves over time. And the Liberty Bell is there because I used to live in Philadelphia, and there's actually an antique section of a map of Philadelphia behind that, of where we lived on Latona Street there. But that piece it's about where you come from as a child, and that kind of gets discarded over time. So I tried to make it look like it was like on the edge of a roadside, and these are just maybe things that you found, like, you know, at the edge of a roadside. There's a piece of barbed wire. I like barbed wire in my work. You'll see it quite a bit. And it always is representing either protection from something or trying to keep something in, one of the two. I always found it to be a kind of useful symbol that way in my artwork. And then there's also a symbol of a key, and that there's always a key in a lot of my work too. And sometimes a lock goes with it, sometimes not. But the key is always to symbolize that there's a way to get out, you know, that you don't have to stay where you are necessarily. You can get recycled into something else. And then just overall, that piece was in the Philadelphia City Hall for Walt Whitman's 200th anniversary. And it was about a Song of Myself, where he's being recycled over time. And even like when you die, you're recycled in nutrients back to the earth, kind of a thing. So.
Tell me about the note.
So the note, my mother died when I was very young. And that was, and I didn't really have anything from her. But my godmother, about 4 or 5 years ago, sent me books, high school books of her, and in the high school book was her inscription from when she received the book with her name, Mary Loretta Fell, and the date on it or the grade I think was on it, of what grade she was in. So it was like the only piece that I had of my mother that I know she actually touched.
Yeah.
And so that's very meaningful, at least to me that way. So
you fold a lot of your personal experiences into your art?
Yeah, I do. I think, well, it's good for me because it's kind of like art therapy. So you're going through your life and you're trying to sort out these different experiences that you've had. But also, I think it's interesting for a viewer too. I'm big into reality shows, so voyeurism is something I like, right?
Yeah.
So I think it gives a person like an insight into that actual artist and almost a little voyeuristic. And I don't know, I like peering and seeing something that's kind of unprotected and open and just an insight into another person.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the themes are universal, so you can get, like each individual viewer is going to bring their own experience to a piece when they look at it, and so they can get something out of it for themselves. Maybe something I didn't even mean, but...
Yeah. I think sometimes when I speak to artists, they start out thinking that they're going to put something together, and when they're done, there's
completely different.
Yeah, and there's something in there that they subconsciously included, and a light goes on when they're done. So it's so cathartic.
Oh yeah, absolutely, very cathartic. Yes, I agree with that. And that's kind of, when I was in school, it's funny because I started off with Bob Ross. He was my teacher back
Who did?
when, right, I know. When I was in the Navy, and that was something I could do when I was not working and stuff. I could, put on a half-hour Bob Ross show, get out of canvas, and anybody can follow Bob Ross, right? And so it got me very much interested in art. My father was a big enthusiast in art, so he had taken us to museums and had these Time Life books that were all about the different artists. And so I was experiencing that when I was a kid. So I liked art, and Bob Ross got me into it. But then when I went to college, I think it was like the second year, I was taking painting 202. It was the second course of painting in my second year, and a light went off that if you maybe do paintings and things that are from experience or something like that, that it makes a difference, not only in your life, but other people's lives too. And I just thought that's cool.
I think people really, they can tell when you're trying to share your personal experience. And we're going to learn more about your personal experience and some more of your artwork when we return.
I'm Marcia Reed, owner and curator of the Gallery 37 in downtown Milford, Delaware, and I love the eclectic feel of 302.
Welcome back. We're talking about the shadow box art of Tim Barton. Now, Tim, you were saying that you put so much of your personal experience in, and one of the most powerful examples of that is finger-pointing fear. Describe and tell us the origin of this.
So finger-pointing fear, I grew up in a house that was a good Irish Catholic alcoholic house. Both my parents were big alcoholics, and they weren't nice to each other when they were drinking, which was every day. And so it always ended in some explosive event at the end of the day. And so I know that alcoholism runs in families, so I'm always very careful about that with me. I don't necessarily abstain from alcohol, but I'm very careful about what I do with alcohol because I know that it would be easy for me to go to that point. So I was at a New Year's Eve party one night, and my husband, Joe, looked at me, and we had been drinking, it was New Year's Eve, and looked at me, and he pointed his finger at me and says, "Are you drunk?" And I was like, oh, no. And it felt like I had become my parents all of a sudden. And so I did this box it's got a picture of me, I think I was maybe 3 or 4 in that photograph. And then on transparency over that photograph, it's got lettering that says, "You're just like your father, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You're just like your mother, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." And then in big block letters around the outside of that is a big R, a big U, and then the word drunk. And it's a question mark at the end, and it's, "Are you drunk?" if you read it in clockwise fashion.
Yeah.
And so it helped me kind of process that whole feeling that, no, I'm not necessarily my parents, but sometimes you feel like your parents.
Yeah. And I think it's something that really is so relatable to other people
Oh, yeah.
because, you know, alcoholism, they say, is genetic. And, you know, whether it's alcoholism or some other trait that your parents have, you know, I think all of us have that fear in us that, you know, oh, we're going to be like so-and-so. And so it's so relatable.
Oh, yeah,
It absolutely is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of those Geico commercials. First-time home buyers becoming their parents.
Oh,
right?
sure.
So it's kind of like that. Like you see things in yourself that's like, crap, my parents did that, and I didn't want to do that necessarily, but you end up doing it.
But you end up doing it anyway. It's part of our evolution. Now, one of the pieces that you shared with us that I think is really, really cool is the asteroid belt. Tell me a little bit about that.
So that one was, there was an asteroid that came down over Siberia and like blew up. And everybody had like photographs of it just as it was coming down. It shattered windows and things like that. But around the same time, there was another asteroid that was coming towards Earth, but it was like a 15-minute difference that if the Earth had been 15 minutes faster in its rotation or its orbit, or this asteroid had been 15 minutes slower in its orbit, that it would have hit the Earth. And it was a big asteroid, it was like the size of an office building. And I just thought that was remarkable that all of time, and it would have been devastating had it hit the Earth. And I thought all of time came down to 15 minutes, that it was just that 15 minutes difference. And I imagine it's happened many times over, but that one I knew about.
Sure. And it really is cool that you have the 6 watches.
And they're all set for 15 minutes. And then there's fossils all in there from other mass extinction events that have occurred over time.
So there's so many layers to this piece.
Yeah.
So what's your process whenever I'm going to do another, do you just get an idea and you piece it together? Or?
Yeah, so I get an idea, and sometimes it's not a fully formed idea, it never is, but it's just an idea, and it's very kind of abstract. But what I do is I pull all my junk out, right? I spread it all over the floor, and I start looking for things that might relate to this idea. And then as I start to form the composition of the piece and bring different objects together, the idea gets formed up then because it makes more sense. And so, and then you just do that, and then you got to clean up the mess at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever find that you go too deep? Because I know you talk about the finger pointing fear.
Yes.
I mean, super deep. But do you ever feel like, okay, maybe this is just for me, or maybe this is something that has to be said?
So there are pieces that I have in my house that I keep downstairs in my studio because I don't want to see them every day, right? They aren't hung up in the top section of the house. They're not necessarily for public view, but they are pieces that are painful enough that I don't want to be looking at them all the time.
Yeah.
The other thing I do is when I get done doing boxes and it's too much, I do these little 8x10 paintings that are just the surf or, the dunes or that type of thing. And it gives my brain a break from the other things to kind of wash out.
Like
and
a
reset.
detox.
Yes, absolutely.
That's amazing.
So,
I've never heard someone talk about detoxing their process.
Yes, you have to.
Yeah.
Well, when you're doing this, or have a good therapist, one of the two.
Well, maybe both.
Or maybe both, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like if you talk to a therapist, you might be able to, come up with even more material.
Yes.
You could write off your therapist. There you go. Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining us. Now, if somebody wants to get a look at your art, you have a website, right?
I do have a website. It's www.timbartonart.com, and it'll take you right to it. Or just Google Tim Barton Artist, you'll find it. It'll come right up.
So coming up next, we're going to talk to your husband.
Yeah.
It's kind of like two creatives, just like a magnet. We're going to talk to him when we return.
I'm Lauren E. Peters, and I just want to thank the 302 for featuring artists like myself.
Welcome back. We are now with Joe Barbella to talk a little bit about his portraits. Joe, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem.
So let's talk a little bit about Thought First.
This actually was a piece that was in a show on Zoom called Excerpts, and the theme was called Beginnings, and it was from the Rehoboth Beach Writers Guild which is a group of writers in Rehoboth Beach, obviously. And so they wanted a theme about beginnings, and that's what I thought, well, what's the first thing that a person does in the thought, word, deed scenario? And that would be thought. So I thought, okay, first thought is a beginning. So that's what this is trying to represent. So that's where like the flash of thought or inspiration is coming from, you know, obviously his brain area.
Yeah.
And then this is actually just a picture of a generic person. It wasn't anyone specific. I was trying to keep it as simple as possible and just try to represent that first thought. And as far as the canvas, I like to do a lot of texture with the canvas. So, because it's all oil paint, right? So I tried to use gesso that has like a sandy texture on it.
That's the first thing I thought. I thought that it was actually sand.
Right, well that's true, and it probably is. It's got like sand and stuff like that, particles in the gesso. And so once I do that, I can do an underpainting, and then I can add color. And the other thing I like about doing that is it gives the painting, it looks like charcoal.
Yeah.
It looks like a charcoal painting, and it's actually oil paint.
It really
so that's
is
the other thing that I really
awesome.
like about it.
Now you typically do portraits.
I do a lot of commission portraits, but I also do still lives and landscapes, anything that's possible.
What is it about the portrait that you think is that draws you in, that is so personal?
It is weird because you can get a lot of emotion from someone's face. Like that is the most characteristic of the human body, I think. And also in the lighting painting, I try to do this one directional lighting so it like show the architect of the facial structure. But on top of all of that, I think emotion is the most important thing in a portrait. So if you can get a feeling that is coming from that person, that's all you need in the portrait.
A lot of times when I look at a portrait, sometimes the expression is so, you think it's one way, but then someone says, oh, the title of the piece is this, and the expression actually changes.
Oh yeah, that's called projection makes perception. Because it's whatever the viewer is thinking and feeling at the time that they're looking at the painting is what they project onto the painting. So that's what's great about art. It can mean totally different things for different people. It's all subjective.
Is there a way to do that? I mean, I know if someone's smiling, you know, pleasantly, I mean, you can't mistake a smile. Is it in the eyes?
I think there's a lot going on with the eyes. They always say that's the window of the soul. But it is interesting because it really is subjective. So I could be doing a piece and thinking entirely something, and then you could look at it and think of it in a different way. So it is interesting that way, how interpretive it is.
So you also do a lot of still life.
I've done a lot of still lives. People are more prone to still lives for commercial reasons, obviously, because if you do a portrait, it's good for the person you're doing a portrait of, but everybody likes grapes and flowers and stuff like that. So it seems to be a more commercial endeavor to do still lives and landscapes.
So when you're painting for yourself, what do you paint?
That's really interesting because I always have an objective when I'm painting. It's usually for a show or for sale or for a person who's commissioned it. So yeah, I'm perplexed by that question because it's always been like an endeavor that I was first asked to do and then I did it. I went to school at University of the Arts in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I had studied illustration. And so once I left the university, it was interesting. That's when they changed to computer graphics.
Okay.
So I had no experience in computer graphics, so I had to actually fall into another industry, which was jewelry. So I ended up doing that for many years and doing the commission pieces on the side. So I guess what interest I had for a while was the sky. I did a lot of cloud paintings because I just loved the way they were formed and the color in them. And
how they would change.
They totally change and shift. And it was interesting just because I guess I liked the expansive space idea. And it was abstract. For just doing focusing just on clouds was like kind of an abstract painting because it wasn't something you would normally look at.
Now, we spoke to your husband in the first two segments of the show. Do you guys ever work together? And what is it like being two creatives under one roof?
I don't think we've ever actually worked on a piece together. We have separate studios in our house, and Tim does his thing and I do my thing. I mean, we help each other. We're all, like, we can critique what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, because we both respect each other's opinion. But as far as working together on one project, no.
Well, maybe we should be next year for the Rehoboth Members
That
Show.
would be the project.
Absolutely. I can just imagine it, though, at the coffee table. You know, I'm stuck on this thing. And so you guys feed each other ideas at times?
Yeah. Because we're right there. We can look at what we're doing in person. So it's actually really helpful to have an artist as a partner, definitely.
Now, do you have a website if someone wants to check out your work?
It's joebarbella.com. I also have music on it.
Okay.
We were talking about that. And
what kind of music?
More like folk. I play the guitar. I'm a singer-songwriter. And,
so you're a Renaissance man, a little bit of everything.
Right. What is it? The do everything, master of none, or something, whatever that short thing is.
I feel that.
Actually, I just did a show at, did you ever hear of the Listening Booth? I don't know.
It sounds familiar.
It's actually this new endeavor, which is really great. They're on One. They're at Tangara Outlets. And they provide a space for a lot of singer-songwriters to do their own material, because you don't have that a lot. There's not a lot of venues for that in the area.
Well, fantastic. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your creativeness with us.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll be right back. Are you enjoying our chat with Barbella and Barton? Well, if you happen to come across their work, snap a picture and share it with us on Facebook. Now, here are a couple of other things you might want to check out. That'll do it for this week's episode of The 302. Make sure you follow us on Facebook for behind-the-scenes content you're just not going to get anywhere else. We're going to leave you now with some fun on Fenwick Island. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on The 302.